With the pandemic pushing technological adoption and progress to new heights, the next session will look at what the emerging trends and initiatives of financial institutions are to continue to stay relevant in these changing times. The fireside chat will be moderated by Brad Carr, Managing Director of Digital Finance of the Institute of International Finance. He will be speaking with Atte Lahtiranta, the Chief Technology Officer of Goldman Sachs. Now over to Brad and Atte for their discussion.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you in Singapore and around the world. I'm Brad Carr, I'm the Managing Director of Digital Finance at the IIF, and I'm delighted to host Atte Lahtiranta for the next session. Atte is the Chief Technology Officer of Goldman Sachs, joining us today from the San Francisco Bay Area. But Atte is not a career banker. That's probably actually more my path. But Atte's background is far more fascinating and impressive. Before joining Goldman Sachs, Atte was the CTO for Verizon Media Group. He held senior or chief architect roles at both Yahoo and Nokia. And he was also the founder of ShopAdvisor. And indeed, the path that has brought Atte from those firms into Goldman Sachs is one of those things that we're going to pick up during our conversation. Atte, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Brad. Hello, everybody. Honored to be here. And yes, I maybe classify myself as a wannabe banker. And it's definitely an area I want to learn more about.
Well, very good. It's the meeting of the nexus of banking and technology, which in a lot of ways is what this festival in Singapore is all about. Let's start with the obvious, I guess. It's 2020. It's the pandemic. That's been very much the dominant topic throughout the year that everyone's been talking about. And COVID-19 has impacted our lives in so many ways. But of course, it has also accelerated the adoption of technology on many fronts, whether in retail, in our practices with hospitality, in education, and so much more. So I was wondering to kick us off, if you could perhaps tell us about how the pandemic has changed the way that Goldman Sachs serves its clients and how it's impacted technology.
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, it's been a very dramatic year, and we're still in the middle of it. And so, a lot of the things we have been doing, we're still doing, and we're going to learn to do even better. But I think there's a fundamental things that went through during the pandemic. So it accelerated Goldman to become more videofied. So we had plans to really bring ourselves from a kind of a conference room culture to more video culture. So that happened very fast, accelerated schedule. We rolled it out for whole of our workplace. We enabled trading, we enabled bankers, we enabled engineers to work effectively. And while doing that, it's also enabled us to become even more globally inclusive culture. It's very fascinating to see that people globally participating to a meeting are on an equal footing when you actually are everybody through a video and not somebody in the room, and the discussions happen after the meeting in the hallway. So it has brought us this sort of an global equality on that side, but at the same time it's also created certain other kind of mechanisms that we are being applied at the same time. So we changed a little bit of how do we build software. So we work more backwards from the customer. We have a little bit more memo-driven culture. So we kind of really try to take a benefit that people have more time, to focus on an area. You're less disrupted. Engineers specifically that I maybe represent them more really love that. And so for Goldman, it's really been a transformative to see that the global presence of us actually has enabled more effective culture, more communicatable culture, but it also kind of still relies on the kind of the apprenticeship, the kind of the coaching culture of Goldman, and just using a new type of mechanisms. And of course, when dealing with the customers, digitalization has happened faster. So of course, we still deal with the customers the same way, really white glove service as we have always given and known for. But we also enable more access through APIs, more access through digital means, and we accommodate a lot of the customer needs with various kind of communication mechanisms, video and otherwise. So it's definitely been a transformative and very, in some areas, very effective, but we're still learning.
Well, indeed, we're all still learning, and in a lot of ways, we've had to learn faster this year as so many of the trends that were already underway accelerated. And that's in some ways helped to overcome some thresholds, but it's probably also brought a few of the known challenges to the fore. If I can pick up on the theme of digital transformation, and in this Singapore FinTech Festival last year, I thought probably the most striking theme was about the partnerships between banks and fintechs and the criticality of these, the importance of these for what it can deliver for customers and really for both parties. But at the IF, we did a study this year together with Deloitte looking at some of the barriers to digital transformation. And we heard a lot about both sides of the coin of bank and fintech challenges, that in some ways the fintechs aren't always ready to partner with a bank. They're perhaps not scalable or enterprise ready. They're not familiar with what it is to work with a highly regulated organization. And on the other hand, in a lot of cases, the banks with their legacy cultures weren't sufficiently adaptable and agile in what it is in onboarding and partnering with a fintech. And I imagine this is something that you see a lot of and have seen a lot of throughout your career. Just interested in any perspectives you have around some of the challenges with those partnerships.
It is a extremely interesting kind of a combination of different sort of a talent coming together. So you have a very entrepreneurial fintechs pushing the boundaries, and like you said, then the banks representing more the regulated, more conservative approach. So for what has worked for Goldman is that we are very active, not only as a partner, and we have nowadays we're driving through tenets, and one of the tenets is look outside first. We don't want to build everything ourselves. We definitely want to see more of the culture of the innovation and how to enable that, and also participate, give back to the kind of the fintech ecosystem, and through open sourcing and others. There's definitely areas which will help fintechs partner more with us, and that is definitely that you mentioned the regulatory landscape. It's an interesting, it's a global phenomena. It's also, by the way, an area which is coming to big tech. Big technology companies are are seeing more regulation coming to them. So in some sense, working with the banks will prepare many of the kind of the younger organizations to deal with this sort of a changing landscape. I would say that the best outcomes, the best successes come when the kind of the expectations are clearly laid out in the beginning. Like, what is the partnership is expected to produce? What do we feel are the risks? How do we mitigate the risks? Because there are areas in banking, for example, many people don't want to say no, but we, for example, Goldman Sachs is powering the Apple Card, and that itself is utilizing a lot of innovation that not all originate from Goldman. We also have services that we are globally, specifically in Singapore, working with the local fintech companies, and the learning goes both ways. And while we want to become faster and utilize the benefits of the fintechs and the innovation and disruptiveness, be that, for example, an area like blockchain, which we are, not that we are necessarily driving blockchain as a technology, but we want to be one of the financial institutions that is part of that ecosystem that's forming around digital contracts and all of that. And that's where the kind of the fintechs will help us to move faster. It's also kind of a talent related. So we definitely want to become as agile as the fintechs are what comes to the software innovation. And many cases, it's best then to partner with somebody who is there, because that's the kind of the way to drive your own organization.
I'm glad you mentioned talent, and I do want to pick that up a little bit later in our conversation, and in particular, that point you made about bringing in the entrepreneurial talent. Before we do that, we might talk a bit about the major technology trends that you see. And you've already referred there to blockchain as one example. But perhaps if we try and look forward a little bit, hopefully we can put 2020 behind us, and hopefully there are better times ahead. But even with or without the pandemic, what do you see as the next major technology trends, I guess, in financial services? And I do want to emphasize for our audience, as I raise that the background you bring from technology and other customer-centric businesses, I think is especially valuable here. But what are the trends that you're most excited about?
So for Goldman specifically, it's a 24/7 nature. Is like going from a bank opening bell to a closing bell to becoming a 24/7 service is a big technology shift. It's a big trend. We need to build better, leaner, meaner, a software. Apification, so becoming a financial cloud. We want to help others to kind of to bring their services with the banks behind them into market. So that's like think of it as becoming a API industry is definitely a big trend. There are areas where we feel extremely strong, like digitalization. So as an industry, this is a very inherently document-driven industry, and many of those don't originate in a digital form, but have been a kind of a paper documents. And so automation, digitalization, natural language processing, and making that more like a machine learn, predictable, quality, governed type of a data is a big trend. Cyber, the world is not definitely getting simpler, it's getting harder. So how do we prepare for different sort of a threats as an industry? How do we partner with the other industry providers, because we all are dealing with the similar type of things? So that's a big trend. But then we're also dipping our toes in even on technologies like quantum, where many people don't know, but as in finance, risk and pricing, and those are very complex calculations. So understanding how those may become simpler, faster with quantum are reasons that Goldman is kind of a forerunner in many of such technologies.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple of the really big trends we see across the industry also, and I certainly share your view that quantum is not a distant proposition anymore, and there's a lot to be done for financial institutions in quantum preparedness at the moment. And you mentioned cloud, which in a lot of ways I think is a key enabler as an institution to upskill and mature in order to prepare for quantum. I'm also glad you mentioned APIs a couple of times, and I think that's a really important part of the new world we see ourselves facing in terms of, we see open banking in different jurisdictions around the world, some talking about moving beyond that to open finance. I'd like to think in terms of really allowing all firms to be able to participate equally in the digital economy. We probably even need to go to open data. But also some of the work with things like the Open Digital Trust Initiative is about bringing that same approach to digital identity. So I think it's significant, I think, that you mentioned the focus that Goldman has put on, I guess, being API ready. And I guess that ties in with part of what you were saying earlier about partnering with the rest of the ecosystems. Am I reading that right?
Yes, it is. And you're absolutely correct. So there's APIfying ourselves and making as a service also kind of allows us to take dependencies on other, there's been terms like service providers, SaaS, and others used. So we definitely want to see ourselves as taking a dependency through APIs, making it contractually, programmatically simple, and also offering ourselves in a similar fashion. So I'm very bullish how this sort of an APIs will kind of come into the fintech and banking world and allow us to take these sort of inter and intra-company relationships and dependencies better than before. Because as an industry, my understanding after the year in this one has been that APIs are still reasonably new, and the kind of the standardization, API management. So Goldman has, for example, developergs.com, which is our kind of approach towards the vast majority of the API developers. We have Marquee, we have different sort of digital assets, but the one element to them is the API and then the data contract, and those are critical elements.
You mentioned standardization there, which I think is really important, because we often see that in the case of open banking in the UK, where the take-up initially was reasonably slow, from the UK and from the US, we've often heard the signals from government wants to be technology neutral, doesn't want to be mandating a particular API solution or interface solution. So it really is incumbent on the industry in that case to step up and help enable that standardization through the sort of measures that you're mentioning. If I weave together that API theme and what it can mean with developers together also with the talent theme, there was an interesting statement made by your co-chief information officers, Marco Argenti and George Lee, where they referred to the concept of developer as our clients. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that concept.
Yes, it's well, of course we have always served our customers through APIs and mechanisms, but it's a kind of a recognition that technology is a extremely important element of our industry, innovation, competitiveness, and so we want to treat our internal engineers at the highest level possible. So we want to provide them the tools, mechanisms, but we also want to serve the external developers, like, for example, the way big tech world has been serving, so that you have a great API documentation, you have implementations that you participate. For example, we open sourced our kind of a data platform elements under the finance, and then you will find them as a project called Legend, which is kind of at the pure and alloy type of a technologies that, and for that, it means that we definitely want to become a trustworthy partner for developers that can program against our APIs with the world-class documentation, testability, and have the basic things that in other industry we take for granted, like SLA, SLO dashboards, single pane of glass, like all of that is something where we really want to take and provide the center stage for a developer, so that using Goldman Sachs is simple, it's efficient, it's reliable, and hopefully fun.
I think it's a great model. I'd like to continue with the talent theme a little. And one of the things that I referred earlier to the IF Deloitte study and the challenges in transformation. And one thing we found talking to a lot of your peers and chief digital officers around the world was that talent was cited as the number one internal challenge, if you like. And I kind of went into this exercise expecting to hear it's a challenge recruiting and retaining talent. But what I overwhelmingly heard from a lot of your peers was it's actually retention, that we can actually recruit the data scientists, the developers that we need, but it's a much greater challenge to retain them, perhaps given questions about the tooling or about the underlying infrastructure, but also the legacy culture, perhaps. So this, I guess, is an area that a lot of financial institutions have found challenging, and just interested in your thoughts as to, particularly with your perspective, having moved across sectors. You talked about the entrepreneurial talent. Is this a challenge that resonates with you?
Talent is always a challenge. You never have enough of great talent, and then when you have to keep them and you be able to provide the path. It's kind of as an anecdotally, it's kind of interesting. When I was coming to Goldman and I had a luxury of meeting with the various set of folks as part of the process, I think the average tenure was like 19 years of all those people, and it was a lot of folks. So there's definitely some sort of a testament to the culture. And I would assume that that's not unique necessarily only to Goldman, that there is definitely an aspect of loyalty in the talent that, for example, Silicon Valley is not so much known for. And so we see talent as a global play. You have to go where the talent is. You need to really provide the career paths for the people. I don't see it as any different than I've seen in the other industries. Like I said, then when the average tenure is so long, when you are talking to the people, it just tells you that there is an aspect that you can build a great culture and great products on, because people are not going through the revolving door. Having said that, on the talent specifically, we have seen and maybe an example of that many people who have been in this sort of a more like a traditional technology companies, public cloud companies, platform companies, they see a new kind of an opportunity combining that knowledge of, let's say, for example, distributed systems together with the vertical like finance. And that combination, that magical kind of a combination of these two industries, giving a huge boost on the kind of what comes to our recruiting efforts, Singapore being an example of that we can have great local kind of a university talent, combine that with the lateral talent, and then combining that with the kind of the opportunity to learn, me included, the finance. It's a very kind of an interesting combination. But I think for the talent, nobody can never rest on that problem. It's a very thing that you need to take care of every day, every single meeting. You need to make sure that your people are happy, they have the career. We have been in a good position, but definitely it's if you think of transforming an organization, it's very important to kind of combine two kind of a different sort of groups. You need to know what you have, but then you also want to have a little bit of a disruptors in, and that combination can be very powerful. But yes, it definitely requires work. So as a space, it is a complex, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Look, perhaps on a related theme, I'd like to conclude by talking a bit about yourself and your own experience. And of course, you've spent the considerable amount of your career in the technology field, in the media and telecommunications industries, the stint that you've had in Silicon Valley. I was wondering, coming from that perspective, what are the things that stand out most for you that we in financial services can learn from Silicon Valley, and perhaps related to that, what prompted you to make the jump from tech into Goldman Sachs, and what attracted you to such a venerable establishment, and of course a highly regulated institution?
Yeah, I think from Silicon Valley, there's examples like product culture that really resonates and drives. There's a lot of like product centricity, which I think, the way the software is being built, starting from a customer, those are the kind of the things that really the industry like, Goldman Sachs represents can benefit. But on the other way, the talent on Goldman is, and I would assume in the industry as a whole, is incredible. And so if you think of what brought me in, it was really the people. It was the opportunity to learn, combine my experience together with something that I don't know anything about, but I know that it can change a life, everybody's life, when you kind of focus on wealth and well-being and social responsibility. So I think short summary is just that it was the people and the opportunity to really be part of something when finance industry becomes API, becomes a financial cloud, becomes a technology innovator, and kind of being part of that.
Well, Atte, you've given us a great whistle-stop tour of the key issues that we've seen both throughout the course of the pandemic year, but also what we have to look ahead. A lot that you've given, I've made a lot of notes. So I'm going to just quickly call out a couple of things that I thought really struck and resonated. Obviously, to start with, you talked about the customer centricity and the importance of that in the culture, and how some of the effect of the pandemic year has been actually beneficial in giving engineers a bit more space to create. The tenet in Goldman Sachs of look outside first, and I got a strong sense from you of this theme of not seeing the institution in a vacuum, but rather being very much part of the external ecosystem, looking to the talent in that ecosystem, partnering with other industries in cyber defense was one that you mentioned, and a talent approach that is embracing the ecosystem, the local universities and the like. And I like the note that you land on, I think, really, which is that there is incredible talent out there, both within finance and within technology, and that it's exciting to have the opportunity to harness that and to blend that, and that's where some of the really great opportunities for our industry come. So Atte, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a great discussion, and we look forward to the rest of the Singapore FinTech Festival.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Brad and Atte, thank you very much for that discussion.